Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, January 6, 2021 Animal Control Advisory Board meeting. The first thing we'll do is take roll call. We have Joy Wilson present with us. Rita Weaver is also here. And coming in from WebEx are Melissa Carnes, David Langford, Melinda Brown, and Dreama Balanji-Gunst is joining us shortly. We do have a quorum, so we can move to the agenda. The meeting is officially called to order. The first item we have is a shelter update, and so we would like Mr. Walker, Mr. Dietrich to please come to the front.
Did we do the minutes?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we have some news. It's not good news, but it's not the worst news. But do you want to get into it? You want me to?
Yeah, I'll go through the permit issues.
Okay.
And, work is still progressing well on the design, on the actual building permit documents for the building. Unfortunately, there are several steps that have to be gone through now prior to us being able to actually get a building permit. DPW has approved the grading plan, the erosion control plan, the stormwater plan. It all went to soil conservation. They also approved it. Good news so far. So that's Bruce Young's operation. Then we've applied for the notice of intent. That's something that goes to MDE. And normally it's pro forma. They just have their inspectors show up at the pre-con on the site before the grading starts. But starting last July, they changed their system. Prior to that, well, I'll just read this. On December 22nd, the Maryland Department of Environment, MDE, formally notified the department that an alternative analysis and review of mitigation options for impacts to the St. Mary's River watershed would be required for approval of coverage under MDE's current general permit for construction activity implementing the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDES, in Maryland. DPW&T plans to submit the information to MDE by the end of the month. It'll be about that thick, all the information they want. We anticipate MDE will respond 60 days later, perhaps slowing down the project by 90 days. So that's actually when they can start the grading. We had hoped to get a jump start on the construction by getting the grading done before the building permit was issued. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. The building shell design has been approved by the fire marshal. So the basic layout of the building, all that's been approved. So we're moving along pretty well. Yesterday we got approval of our runway extension project at the airport by MDE. They put us through this process. We know a lot more now than we did on how to get through it. And we have a good relationship, I think, with the reviewer. There's one reviewer for the whole state of these plans. And so I'm hopeful. But right now, we've told Steve that we're figuring it's a 90-day delay in the actual start of construction, which means the building won't be done until probably June of '22. May, June. Yeah, there's, actually, they gave us a list of what they wanted us to do in May during what's called I've gone blank on it, the Planning Commission staff review, the TEC review, because MD participates in those. And we'd already done all those things on the plan. So I think the plan is going to be, that will be successfully approved. We're probably going to have to put in place a larger forest conservation easement on the property, which is not a big deal. There's enough unbuildable land that, why not put it in a forest conservation easement? So I think we'll be okay, but it's a matter of putting this stack of papers together and shipping it off to them.
So how does that delay impact groundbreaking, which we were thinking was going to happen in January?
Excuse me. So it's probably 90 days off.
Okay.
Is Drew Kelly on the phone?
He's coming in and out. There he is, yes.
Oh, there he is.
Yes,
Drew, could you explain what's in the package that you have to send off to MDE?
yeah, so there's really three parts of this. There's a alternatives analysis, which we're using the RFA study to justify why we feel it should be in the development district of FDR, in close proximity to sewer and water. And that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is the social economic impact statement, and it's basically saying why it needs to be close to population centers. And then the last item is what can you do on site to save trees, deforestation, or to reduce the impacts of the development that you're going to be pursuing. On this property, there's a large amount of wetlands that kind of surround the peninsula that the parcel is on, and it's really undevelopable land as it is, that we're just going to be overlaying the forest conservation easement over top of those wetlands.
So does this entail any additional public hearings or planning commission approvals?
No. No, all the planning documents and everything were already done. So it's just a matter, that's why it's sort of a regurgitation of everything we've already done and why the site was picked and so forth. So no, that's not being reopened.
Okay. Do other members have questions about this?
The study, I don't have any questions about it. I do have a question if there's a possibility to bring the timeline back and MDE study.
Just by constant communication with Angel Valdez, who's the reviewer. And as I said, we're on first name basis with her now because of the airport project, and we know a lot better now how to put together what she wants to see. That was our first experience with that, so. And we'll probably have that experience on some other projects that we have going forward. So,
But there's not anywhere in the project that you see an opportunity. Yeah.
could you say that again? I'm sorry, you kind of broke up.
I was saying you don't see any space in the project and you could narrow the gap of the 90 days final delivery of the building.
Drew, do you
I
see?
could comment on that. The issue really ends up being when we can start breaking ground. There's about 12 months of site work and construction that's going to, when that start date happens. So we're just delaying when that start date is going to be permitted to go forward.
Right, so at this point, we know what needs to be built. It's been carefully scheduled, Drew, by the contractor. They know, I guess, the critical path they've got to go through to get it built, and it's looks like a year is the time frame for that. Then is that accurate?
So you had previously submitted the rationale for why it should be where it is going to be. So you have all of the background information on why that site was selected. So is it a matter of just repackaging the information? Have you been advised about what specifically is going to be needed in terms of remediation? Or will they wait until they see your package and then come back and say the things you have to do?
The normal process is that, yes, they would like to respond because we've been in communications with them over the airport. We kind of know what they're going to be asking for. Not as like formal direction, but in conversation, they've indicated that we should plan on conserving a 2-to-1 ratio of the forest which we are removing. So we're going to end up with about between 7 and 9 acres of conservation around the developed site.
Did you catch that, or do you want him to repeat that?
I did. Could you just keep us informed about the process and, you know, what step is happening at what point in time?
We will.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this?
There is one more impact that has had from this, and that is on budgeting. Because when you consider budgeting, if you recall, the plan has been to hire the shelter manager January of next year to be able to develop policies, which is something that we are going to be discussing later, and we can certainly talk about now. But that person will help to organize how that shelter is going to be run, and we've now pushed that back 6 months. So the start date that we're anticipating will be July of 2022. Is that correct? Is that right?
Yes.
And then we will be pushing the staff back behind that another 6 months, because again, that was supposed to come in June, so then that would be pushed back another 6 months. And again, that'll be fluid. We've worked hard on that today, me and Marianne in finance, on making sure if it comes earlier, because there's always that possibility they could complete it sooner. Do we have enough cushion so that we'll have the funding to be able to start earlier, or do we start later? So we were working on that today. And again, I can roll right into shelter policies because it is related to the shelter update that's sooner. So the question is who's working on shelter policies? And the truth of the matter is nobody really is working on it. Now, what we have done is we have captured all of the policies from Calvert County. We have them all from Charles County. Those are there to assist us and to work through this. But the plan has been from day one, and it continues to be, the shelter manager will develop those policies. They're going to be managed in that shelter. They're going to be my division manager. They will do that. So we are not prepared to jump into that project until we get that person on board. but we are beginning to take the necessary steps to give them the tools so that they can move forward. So, but that is the answer to what Dreama had asked about shelter policies. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be glad to answer. We will be really giving you an update, every meeting, so certainly we'll be telling you where we are. Drew is a very adept young man, and I'm hopeful that he will get this done quickly, and I believe he will. So he made me feel pretty positive about where we are in this when he called me and told me. So I hope you guys do too, that while this may be an unexpected, unanticipated impact on us, I think that we're going to get through it probably as painless as we can and as quickly as we can. So we will not delay. We'll move as quickly as we can. So
I would expect that when you start your search for a shelter manager, that person that you select would have knowledge of shelter policies
absolutely,
to start with.
absolutely.
And that would be one of the requirements that you would be looking for. But as that person does develop policies for St. Mary's County, would we as an advisory board have an opportunity to see them in draft form and provide some input?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Are there any other questions on this item? If not,
I did have a question
okay.
for clarity. Sorry, I have an echo, so I'm going to. I hear that the shelter manager mid-year 2022. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Correct.
With the staff following 6 months?
Melinda, we're having a little trouble hearing you, but when you move closer, we seem to be able to hear you better. Can you repeat that
Move
last?
closer.
Yeah, so
I was in the
yes.
staff is anticipated 6 months following shelter manager.
So the intent was to have the shelter manager come on board 6 months before the shelter opens. 30 days or so, maybe a little bit more than that, we would have the staff begin to come on board. The shelter manager, that is another assignment, as they're going to be leading our search for all of these employees. So that's the plan. Now remember, all of this is going to be fluid depending on how this is resolved. So I'm hopeful we'll go sooner, but that's our target date right now.
Certainly, but from a budget point, looking at mid-year for manager, end of year roughly,
We actually counted on.
and a shelter opening in the early 2023.
Well, we're hoping it will open in the summertime. We're hoping, but again, it depends on how this project turns out. So, but that's the hope. So we're hoping.
Summer of 2022.
So I have that numbers right? Yes.
Y'all are a little confused.
Yeah, because FY
You can't
'22,
have staff, if you can't open without staff.
right.
It's fiscal '23, but it would be, well, you're right, the staff's got to come on.
It's
So
a clarification
right.
of fiscal year,
Right.
fiscal year.
So it'd be fiscal year of '23, but yes, summer of '22 is what we're hoping to open now. Okay.
I guess, Mike, that goes back to the point. The major is targeted July 2022. And you're thinking a shelter opening summer, but staff coming on 6 months. Just don't.
I'm not sure I'm getting that.
Okay, so if the shelter is scheduled to open somewhere, I heard June of '22,
We're hoping, right?
then the shelter manager would be on board January,
Correct.
and the staff would be on board at least in early May.
May, June, right. We're thinking June, but we're hoping earlier.
Okay.
And again, we are making sure that we have a cushion of funding to be able to do that earlier. So we're doing our best, and it's going to be challenging, but we'll see. Again, it's very fluid, and we'll know better as we get closer to it. So.
Well, I think we just wanted to clarify and support that the shelter manager should be available to you 6 months ahead of time. So whenever the opening is, that person should be on board 6 months earlier.
So the process of starting that will begin before that time frame, obviously, so that we can bring them on as quick as we can. So, but January is the target date. So we would probably start November of going through that process of trying to select them.
Okay. Melinda, does that answer your question?
I guess, at one point I heard the picture was on July 2022. That's not,
I'm not sure.
And yet, shelter not open, will be completed with construction in June of '22.
Okay,
And then so there's sort of a month of loose ends being pulled together before
okay.
anything could actually open.
But if I can get my people hired, that month gives them the opportunity to be prepared for when it does open.
Right.
My
Which-
concern, I think what her initial concern was, the confusion was as soon as you said end of year, we're
thinking end of budget year, right.
Here, and they hear end of year, and they would have immediately thought December of 2022.
Agreed.
So they're
Agreed.
thinking, why is this?
Right.
But yeah, it's the end of fiscal year. You'll have your
Right.
staff in place before.
that wasn't my confusion.
Yes, that's.
My
what they-
apologies.
Yes.
So my apologies. And again,
No,
this
that
is-
was not my confusion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
My confusion was at the point that the shelter manager is now being budgeted to start July 1st, 2020.
No, January,
July 1st, January, right,
January,
23. Is it 22?
no, it's 22.
I can't hear whoever's.
I'm looking for the email.
I couldn't hear the question,
I,
if it's for me.
I think what would be most important to say is that when we establish the completion.
to the microphone.
Sure. I
Your
think what would be
mics are
most
not
important.
on or up in the room, so we can.
Okay, I think the important thing to remember is the target date for the hiring of the shelter manager will be 6 months before opening. So I think, we're talking about dates, but we really, until we know for sure when that's going to be done, my target is to have that shelter manager hired 6 months before it opens. And I think that's a better way to describe when we're going to hire this. We can tell you when we think it's going to be done, but I want that person on board 6 months before the shelter opens. That's what's important.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Okay.
okay. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you all for the update, and we just appreciate you keeping us apprised of the developments.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go back to approval of minutes of November 4th, 2020. We did send the minutes out, so everybody had a chance to review them. Are there any issues or questions with the minutes of November 4th? If not, can we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
I can second that. I can second that.
Dr. Langford is the second. All those in favor, say aye. And people on WebEx, if you could just raise your hand. Thank you.
Aye.
Melissa? Are we able to hear Melissa Carnes?
She sent a chat in, approved.
Okay.
I approve.
Okay, thank you very much. The minutes are approved. Now we move to election of officers. So I need a motion to go into election of officers. Do we have a motion?
I move to enter into election of officers for the positions of chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary for the Animal Control Advisory Board for the year of 2021.
Okay, and I don't believe we require second and voting on that. I think that's just a standard The floor is now open for chairperson for the 21 year. Do we have any nominations?
I move to, what do you call it? Not appoint, Dr. Richardson for chair.
Okay, do we have any other nominations for chair? Then in that case, I do need a second. I've been nominated for chair. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Dr. Langford is the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Melissa?
I approve.
Okay. I think we have all the votes. Any nays? Okay, the motion passes unanimously with our quorum. The floor is now open for the office of vice chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? I'd like to nominate Melissa Carnes for vice chair. Do you consent, Melissa?
Just to clarify, this is for the 2021 year.
Yes, just this upcoming year. 1 year.
Okay, I'd be glad to accept the nomination.
Okay, do we have any other nominations for vice chairperson? Then I need a second for Melissa Carnes, who's been nominated for vice chairperson.
I second.
Rita is the second. And we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of Melissa Carnes as our vice chairperson for 2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And do we have any nays? Okay, then it passes unanimously. And finally, we have the office of secretary. Do we have nominations for the office of secretary? I would like to nominate Melinda Brown. Melinda, do you consent?
I do not.
Okay. I would like to then nominate Rita Weaver. Rita, do you consent?
Yes.
Okay. Could we have a second for that?
I second that.
Dr. Langford is the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
This is Melissa. Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. The next order of business is we are required to provide an annual report. And Melinda, I have asked if you would please send us a copy of a draft. And then in March, at the March meeting, we could finalize it. We could vote on it.
Yeah, I have a stuff ready. To how should I distribute?
I think it can just be sent via email. And we won't be taking action until the next meeting. We'll do that publicly. And I do realize we are a little bit late on that, but I'm hoping that that will not be a problem. Our bylaws do call for an annual report in January. The next item is legislation, ordinances, regulations, and shelter policies. And I've asked Mr. Walker to speak to that item.
Okay, so we've covered shelter policies. And remember, the way that's going to work is the shelter manager will lead us through that. Again, we've begun to accumulate a lot of data that's going to assist with that, but that's the process that we will take with that. And again, we're looking at Calvert and Charles, and that's going to help us quite a bit. So the other one was legislation. So the question was, what legislation is being put forward? And the only legislation is one that I actually brought forward, and that is body cameras for animal control officers. I did that because being in law enforcement, I know the value of that. It protects our animal control officers. It provides valuable evidence. It certainly is accountability, but that is where that is. Now, that went to the commissioners of St. Mary's County. They voted and agreed to send that forward. It went to our legislative delegates, and they have agreed and is now on its way to Annapolis. And of course, it will have to go through the system there. But that is the only thing in St. Mary's County that has to do with animal control. And I can stop and see if there's any questions on that.
Do we have any questions on that?
Yeah, I do. Will you be going, like, I know that things are going to be different this year up in Annapolis. Will you be presenting any testimony or anything by?
I will.
Okay.
And I may be going, but I don't know the process yet on what they're doing. It may very well be video. I don't know, but I am going to go and offer testimony, and someone else might too.
Okay.
So, but there's great value in that for lots of different reasons. We've had a number of cases where people have been injured, animals been injured, and it would be very nice to have that to be able to review and see how the officers did and to see how the incident actually occurred. So I think it's very important. This is the second year that we've put this in, and it's now gone to Annapolis, and I'm very happy with that. So it's good. Okay, so the last one is ordinances. And Dreama, I know you want to work on that, and I think your question was, who can assist with that? So I think that we're going to do, COVID has dampened all of our efforts, but I think that I will be your assistance on that. So I do have some experience in ordinances on animal control. In my previous career, I oversaw animal control as a police chief for 10 years. I've actually written some of the ordinances. I will help you to work on that. We'll have to do it through Zoom, and certainly we'll have to work around the schedules. But if you want to begin working on that, I will certainly begin to assist you through that process. So, but I know that we've been stalled on that. And again, COVID has hampered just about everything we're doing. But if you've got any comments or questions, I'll be glad to try to answer that.
Now, I've talked to Jamie Raley and Tony Joe St. Clair, sent them out, what was sent to us about the ordinance. And I know that it's going to be something that the Farm Bureau for the Agriculture would really like to have an input, at least see what type of ordinance you will have for, the agriculture areas, so that, that we can take a look at it and see how that's going to impact.
So Jamie Raley is a very capable person, and I think he's a good resource for that. So I would suggest certainly bring him in on that. So I know Jamie, and I know he's certainly got some expertise in that, and I think that's a good resource.
Okay.
So that's good.
Jamie has been our contact for the last year whenever we talked about it.
Good.
Okay.
We just haven't been able to get.
It's pretty tough right now getting people together. So. Okay.
Okay.
I'm referring to pre-COVID.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Walker. We now have board member time. Do any of the board members wish to share any comments?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. I do have just one that I want to apprise everyone of in advance. I am hoping that at the March meeting, we can revisit our subcommittees. We've had changes in membership on this board, and we have dealt with a very serious limitation in terms of having subcommittee meetings. So I'm thinking that if we could take a look at the 4 subcommittees that we currently have, which are bylaws with Rita Weaver chairing, Legislative and Animal Control Regulations with Dreama Balanji-Grunst chairing, Animal Shelter with Rita Weaver chairing, and Public Education with myself. I think the questions we want to consider are, which of these committees do we want to continue? Do we need to add, delete, rename any of the committees? Do the chairs wish to continue, or would they rather someone else take the opportunity? And then, again, look at membership, since we do have a different configuration now. And also take a look at, depending on where we are with the COVID restrictions and the state requirements regarding meetings, how many can attend, that kind of thing, that we would look at procedures for subcommittee meetings under the COVID restrictions and see what we need to do in order to get the subcommittees to become a more active part. And under that topic, my thinking was that Dreama had mentioned the ordinances and that they really do need to be brought up to date. And we can do that now if Dreama is willing to take that on with her subcommittee. And perhaps go through, we did include a copy of the current ordinances so that you could see what was in there. But that subcommittee could certainly look at what needs to be revised, changed, and then share that with the entire board at a future meeting to gain additional input and at least provide the help, because that, I think, is a major task. So just some things for you to be thinking about, but I do think we need to revisit our subcommittees and reorganize, and we can do that in our March committee meeting. You can be thinking about what committees you want to be on, if you think we need to have some changes in additions, deletions, even renaming. And that's really all I had. Does anyone have anything else?
I wanted to mention the Public Education Outreach Subcommittee that Pat and I are on. We lost one of the members from attrition. So it's just the two of us. And thinking of the summer completion of the shelter that's pushed back, I still think that at some point we need to increase the number of people on that subcommittee, because that subcommittee is going to be very important in the run-up to opening the shelter. Now, it's still in the future, but I just wanted to put that out there, that I think we need more than 2 members.
And remember,
when we get closer to the opening.
We can invite members of the community to be on these subcommittees, so it doesn't have to be only board members. And that may be, we may want to look at people in the community that we think might have an interest in some expertise there and invite them to be a part of the subcommittee.
I think that's a good plan, personally.
Okay, if there is nothing else, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Langford is the second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.